Welcome back to the Coaching Clubhouse with Adrian Last.
Welcome back to the Coaching Clubhouse for our first episode of 2026. If you're new to the show, it's for everybody, everywhere, and it's all about the real stories of coaching that support people to grow, adapt, and thrive. I'm your host, Adrian Last, and today we'll be getting into a conversation about comeback moments, confidence, and creating workplaces that truly work for everyone. My guest today to talk about this is Jessica Chivers, a Chartered Coaching Psychologist, Fellow of the Association for Coaching, and Executive Coach to leaders navigating pivotal career moments. She's the founder of the Talent Keeper Specialists, a collective of accredited coaches and psychologists helping people shorten the distance between a career-changing moment and performing at their best again. Jessica's the author of Mother's Work, host of the Comeback Coach podcast, and one of the first coaching psychologists in the UK to achieve chartership from the British Psychological Society. Her work has been featured by the BBC, Sky News, the FT, and Woman's Hour, and she's advised organisations like BlackRock, Coca-Cola, Channel 4 and ITV on supporting people through transitions that matter. This is going to be an incredibly interesting conversation. Jessica, welcome to the Coaching Clubhouse.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Adrian. I'm really happy to be here.
First of all, congratulations, because you have become a Chartered Coaching Psychologist. That is a huge milestone. Tell us what that journey actually looked like for you.
Oh, well, firstly, it's so nice to be able to sit here and sort of reflect on that because it was a lot of hard work. The backstory, Adrian, is that the British Psychological Society, which is one of my professional bodies, the other being the Association for Coaching, which I'm sure some of your listeners are familiar with, the BPS voted to create a division of coaching psychology. I think it was in 2020. But don't quote me on that. So alongside, say, clinical psychology, forensic psychology, educational psychology. So this division is new. And of course, along with the creation of that division, there needed to be a path to partnership. Not partnership, chartership. And so this route was created. And essentially, there are these various standards. And I worked out, as soon as this sort of came along as an option, I thought, I want to do this. I want to get my chartership. And I looked at all of the levels and the standards, and God, it's really demanding. And I got a supervisor and she said, look, you'll be able to do a lot of this. Just work out which bits you can't evidence. Yeah. And that's where you need to start. And the one thing, Adrian, that I knew I wouldn't have been able to evidence was some level 8 research. Level 8 being PhD research. That doesn't mean you have to have done a PhD. But anyway, story short is I thought, right, I'm going to conduct a piece of research and I'll tie it into the sort of the work that we do so it's sort of meaningful. And again, long story short, started on this research in January 2022. I'd literally had a first coaching conversation with my a supervision conversation about what this research was going to be. And my eldest was permanently excluded from school. 4 months before his GCSEs for persistent disruptive behaviour. Right. ADHD, autism, bit of a nightmare. Youngest was then dreadfully ill. It was annus horribilis. And I thought, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going with this research. And then I just thought, oh my God, let's have a bit of self-compassion here. You cannot try and carry on with this research as well as business as usual and 2 kids. So I had to park the research. And then I came back to it in, was it 2024, 2023? I don't know. Everything's blurring. So it was essentially 3 years to get the chartership because it was the doing the research and we had participants from ITV, which I will be forever grateful for. And then all the collation of evidence. And there was so much that I had to collate to show that I could demonstrate these 5 standards. So it was a really big undertaking. So it's really nice to sit here and go, yes, I am now a chartered coaching psychologist.
I mean, so that your story then makes your achievement even more meaningful.
I think so. And I like to think that if something's worth going after, and if it's not straightforward, that you will always find a way to do it. But I think you need to have you cannot be pig-headed about this stuff and think, well, I'm going to do it anyway, and I'm going to carry on with my plans as I had them, because you've got to have a bit of self-compassion and realize that's not going to work. I've just got to put it to one side. There was so much frustration on my part, but my focus needed to be elsewhere. So, I've got there now, and that's great.
And how did it work for you, because with juggling academic and professional work, family life, neurodivergence at home? I mean, you touched on it there. What did you learn during that time about resilience and compassion?
Well, I suppose what I learned, and there was so much rich learning that went on in that time, Adrian, is that resilience is not a constant. Resilience ebbs and flows according to so many different factors around you. I mean, if we just think on a really micro level, resilience on a day-to-day basis can be affected by how well slept we are, whether we've eaten, how well hydrated we are, whether we've had some fresh air, all of those things. And then on a sort of wider level, I think our resilience is affected by what's going on in our family, the emotional demands that we've got on ourselves, perhaps the physical demands, what's being expected of us in our role. So that's a big thing. Resilience ebbs and flows. It's not a constant. And then there's lots of research around self-compassion. I always get her name wrong. I think it's Kirsten Neff, who's the big researcher around self-compassion. But you have to have that when things are tough and when you're not living up to the expectations that you've set yourself, or the plans that you thought were reasonable. And then all of a sudden, well, why can I not do this? Why this plan that I created looked so doable on paper, and now I find myself not being able to do that data collection in that amount of time, get all those transcripts transcribed, and and often things take a lot longer than you expect them to take. So that was a big learning. But self-compassion and resilience, two really nice things for you to pick up on, because I think they're key to human flourishing.
Absolutely. And one of the key reasons I was keen to get you onto the podcast, Jessica, is to talk about comeback coaching, because it's hugely important. Tell us why it's important, and also what inspired the research that you've written about in the Coaching Psychologist.
Comeback coaching is a phrase that I coined probably over a decade ago to describe coaching that is put in place at the point that an employee returns to their organization. And really, it's about recognizing that that is a big transition. And I think of it as, from the employer's point of view, it is really about shrinking the time it takes for an employee to feel comfortable and capable and delivering at their best. And the coaching really is about flushing out, or having very honest conversations about how that individual is feeling. So what are they worried about? What are they excited about? What do they want things to look like, say, in 6 months' time? And creating the space for them to think about those worries and overcome them, and plan to hold on to the things that they're hopeful for, and remind them, look, this is what you're working towards. And the way that we work is we bring in the line manager as well, not into the coaching sessions with the person who's coming back, but almost as a sort of separate, I'd say it's a blend, Adrian, of teaching, mentoring, and a bit of coaching of the line manager. We're essentially equipping them with the ability to have the right conversations at the right time with a colleague who's coming back from leave. Because if that line manager has got no lived experience of having an extended period of leave, they haven't got a lot to draw upon. And even when a line manager does have experience, their experience might be quite different to their team member. So it's about driving up empathy, trying to get rid of any assumptions, and encourage a much stronger, empathetic, open relationship between them and their team member. So shrinking performance really is the headline. Shrinking the time it takes for someone to be back at their pre-leave performance is really the headline, I think, for comeback coaching.
Okay, I'll ask you a question about the line manager participation in comeback coaching in a sec, but just to stay for a moment about the types of emotions, I guess, and challenges that you typically see in comeback coaching. And I suppose, when I was originally thinking about this, I was kind of was naturally thinking about mums or dads that are returning to work, but actually it's not just that, is it? It's sickness and sabbatical as well.
Well, you're right. And actually, that's on my mind at the moment, because the next episode of my podcast, Comeback Coach, is with an ITV employee.
Oh, really?
A chat.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the season 9 finale of the podcast. And he was coming back to work after sick leave. And it's a really nice conversation. I did some coaching work with him, and he was really keen to then do an episode of the podcast and talk about his journey back into ITV and how supportive ITV have been, and the power of comeback coaching in helping him to adjust. So the sorts of things that are on people's minds, whether it's sick leave or maternity leave or shared parental leave, are things like, can I still do it? So that's about self-doubt. That's questioning. There's also something about, gosh, I used to be so driven and my career was the really big thing, and my identity shifting because I still love my job and I still want to do a really good job, but now I've got this other thing. So if it was parental leave, it's a child, so it's a recalibration, say, of family life, and people wanting to put more time into that. And it's getting comfortable with, where does work fit into my broader life, and how can I still hold true to my values and make the contribution that I want to make, say, to ITV. And I was actually having this conversation just 2 weeks ago with a father at ITV who's just come back from leave. Is, I love my job, I am in my dream job, but now I've got a child, and the tension. So there's some tension there. So there's a whole load of emotions. And I think sometimes as well, people think, is there still a place for me on the team? Because if the team has coped, it can be, well, is there a place for me? And was my cover better than me? So again, there's a lot of doubt going on when people come back from leave.
And do you find that the doubt is the overwhelming kind of emotion that people feel, or the thing that they feel when they're coming back?
I think that there are lots of different emotions to different extents in different people. So some people can feel, very happy. A lot of people feel very happy to be coming back, or certainly the people that we coach that tend to be professional, career orientated individuals whose identity has been largely defined by their occupation. So they are looking forward to having the conversations in a business context, thinking about business challenges. So there's a lot of positivity around it, but there is worry. There is worry about, can I still do my job? Can I, will people still see me in the same way if I now work less than full time because my ongoing health issue means that would be better for me? Will I still be seen as committed, that I still want to progress in this organization? So I think there's worry, there's doubt, there's happiness. There can be some fear, depending upon the relationships that people have with their line manager, or perhaps a new incoming line manager. There's just all sorts of emotions. And I think line managers need to be alive to the fact that people are feeling all sorts, and they can be feeling contradictory emotions at the same time.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because as a line manager myself, and I would expect that a lot of this is natural, but that's not always the case. You do hear stories about line managers who maybe don't have the understanding or empathy, and so those line managers that might be listening right now could be thinking, well, how do I do this better? How do I support my team member through their comeback? What do you think is one practical change that they could make tomorrow?
It starts, I think, with remembering that this is a period of transition rather than a single event. So just as you would if you had a new team member, you wouldn't, joining from outside the business, let's say, you wouldn't do a wonderful day one induction and take them out to lunch and then think they know what they're doing and they feel supported. There would be this longer period of time that you consider that team member as new, and that you need to put some more in, more different intensity, than you would when that person's established in the team. So if you can think about someone's return to work as being a period of transition, not a single event, and the duration of that is probably anywhere between about 3 and 6 months. People say it's taken them about 6 months to feel fully readjusted and fully comfortable. That's not to say that they haven't been giving a great performance and they haven't been delivering, but it might have been coming at a great cost, say in their personal life. They might be working at weekends, in the evening, to try and just keep everything together. And it's only at that 6-month mark they go, oh, I feel like I know what I'm doing. I feel like things are coming together and a bit easier. And of course, I mean, all that said, if you've got a baby in the mix who is not sleeping, that can take a lot longer, because sleep deprivation, fractured sleep, causes all sorts of problems. But that single thing, I think, Adrian, see it as a transition, not as an event, and just try and come at your team member without assumptions about what might be going on for them, and stay curious about what their experience is.
Jessica, you've been a passionate advocate for shared parental leave and for men taking meaningful time out to care. In fact, my nephew has just had a baby 3 weeks ago. He works for NatWest and he's got 6 months parental leave, which is incredible. Why is it such an important thing for gender equality at work, do you think?
Because it normalizes men being carers. So at NatWest, and I happen to know a little bit about what they're doing, so I was chairing a panel a couple of weeks ago with someone who heads up the Family Parents Carers Network at NatWest. So they are doing good stuff there. So when, for example, a business enhances shared parental leave pay, so makes it easy for a man, let's say, to take 6 months off work when he becomes a father, what we're doing is we're making it in that business equally likely that a man and a woman of childbearing age, let's say, is going to step out the business. So it becomes, it's less of a burden on, how do I say this, on women's careers, because the norm becomes that anyone might take that amount of time out, because we know that women's careers are affected by taking time out. But as soon as it becomes the norm that when people become a parent, they take some time out, I think it makes organizations think a little bit differently about progression and, not penalizing people for taking time out, because I think it's something like 82% of women will have a child. So we probably we need to factor that into business life and accept that most people will become parents. Therefore, we need to factor that into the way that we think about what a committed employee is. You can be committed and ambitious on, say, 4 days a week and having taken 6 months out maternity or shared parental or adoption leave. We begin to normalize, if men are carers and they are needing to be at home to pick children up or cover a sick day, that's how it helps gender equality. I think that's what I see in organizations that are making shared parental leave something that they encourage men to do when they pay it. It's having a positive impact on their partners' careers, and that's the kind of world I want to live in, is where the load, not necessarily every family is shared, but where it's an option and people don't feel like their career is penalized because they've taken some time out or because they work less than full time. It says nothing about commitment or ambition. It just says, I've got some responsibilities that I cannot do if I'm here 5 days a week. Yeah.
And that feels more a natural part of life. I remember when my 2 girls were born and I had 2 weeks off from work both times, and it never felt enough. And then I'm back into a really busy job and trying to balance a very young baby and then a young baby and a 2-year-old. It's with my wife and everything else, so it's so important.
It really is. And look, let me geek out for a second. I can't tell you the journal that it was in, but I'm pretty sure it was like a Scandinavian journal where they'd done some research based on quantitative data around new mothers' use of antibiotic prescriptions and antidepressant prescriptions, and they found that where men were taking more chunks of leave, those mothers' use of antibiotics and antidepressants went down, and that was to do with those fathers being around at home, sharing that real practical emotional load of new parenthood.
Really?
So yeah, the village isn't there that we talk about, needing a village to raise a child. For a lot of people, it's not there. And therefore, if there are two parents in a family and you've just had a baby, well, let's allow those parents to share the care, or at least be at home together, learning how to be parents in those early months. Personal story. I remember, in fact, this is funny. My husband was working at the BBC at the time, and we just had Artemis, our youngest. Eldest was 2. I remember some days I would ring him crying, usually between about 3 and half 3, and just saying, you have to come home, I cannot cope, because I've got this toddler. And then by that time of the day, I'd been on my own since sort of 6:45.
Yeah.
He'd driven off down to White City, and it wasn't every day, but I just think, what if he'd been able to work from home a bit more, or he'd been able to have paid parental leave, how different that could have been, because it was hard, really hard.
And Jessica, one of your recent LinkedIn posts that I was looking at, and I enjoyed looking at it actually, was when you asked Jeremy Hunt about childcare. And I think it was about 1.7 million women who are held back from taking on more paid work. So what do you want from policymakers? What do you want them to understand, I suppose, about the connection between childcare, equality, and the UK workforce?
Very, very simple, succinct answer here, that childcare is essential infrastructure. If we're going to have two parents working, we've got to have a childcare system that is easy, that is inexpensive and reliable. And that is not the case in the UK right now. Okay.
What was his response?
I can't remember. I think he just took the book, smiled, and I think he might have, it might be in a LinkedIn post actually, I think he referred to some bill or some work that was being done by like an all-party parliamentary group that he could say, oh, this is being looked at.
Yeah. Okay. Do you see
There's
any
still more work to do?
Do you see change coming?
Not anytime soon.
No.
I think we're fundamentally not there as a country. Scandinavian countries where things are done quite differently, and I think, is it Canada as well? It might be Canada, where it's really heavily subsidized, and that's where we need to get to, because most people have children. Most families have two people working.
Your new retreat, Jessica, it's called Raising and Rising. It's coming up on the 9th of February. It's designed for mothers in senior roles. What inspired this, and what are you hearing from women about what's holding them back from the next step?
Oh, I'm so excited about this. I'm doing this in collaboration with a parenting coach and author, my colleague Anita Clear. Okay. And really, it's been about 14 years in the making, because when I was writing Mother's Work, which obviously was aimed at women coming back from maternity leave, then when the book came out, I sort of quickly realized, hey, there's not just a problem for women coming back from mat leave. Women's career progression is not happening at the same rate as fathers and child-free men, and there are various barriers to them having the progression that they want, and that is commensurate with their skills, their experience, their performance. And so Raising and Rising is one day followed by 2 group remote coaching sessions for a small cohort of women in mid to senior roles who are on succession plans and whose organizations want to keep them and see them go further in the organization, to come together and look at what do they want, why do they want it, and what are the real and perceived barriers to them getting where they want to go. And there are certain things that really are an overreach for an employer to start talking about with employees, such as their expectations of themselves as parents. I think that's not something that employers can do, but that's something that Anita is doing day in, day out, is helping parents think about, where are your expectations? Could you soften them? Because perhaps you are putting too much on yourself, which is getting in the way of you getting where you want to be in your career. So we'll be doing some work around that. But also we do know that things are stacked against mothers because of the things I've already spoken about. You know, people thinking that because you work less than full time, that you are less committed or less ambitious. So again, part of the day we'll be working on how can women go back into their businesses and pitch for what they want and say, I have absolute clarity that I say want to make head of department, or I want to make director, I want to make partner, and this is why I want to make it, and this is the way I want to do it.
Yeah.
And it might be that in their business, nobody has ever become a partner, let's say, in a law firm, if they have worked 3.5 days a week for the last 3 years. But we want them to go away from that day and say, look, yes, I have been working 3.5 days a week, but that in no way reflects my commitment and where I want to go. I've done this, and this. I really want to make partner, and go and have conversations that they perhaps wouldn't have if they hadn't been and spent that time with us, because there isn't a precedent in their organisation for working the way they want to work in that really senior role. So senior job shares, for example, Adrian, they don't really happen to the extent that they could. So it's a day of looking at possibilities and bashing through those barriers, real or perceived. And I'm really excited.
It sounds incredible. How do listeners get to be part of this?
Well, come over to the website, talentkeepers.co.uk, and you'll see there's an article on our insights page that's got all the details. Or maybe you could put a link in the show notes.
I will absolutely put those in the show notes. And Jessica, one final question for you. And this feels a bit like a big one, but what's the one coaching question that you most love to leave with clients and maybe listeners when they're facing change?
What's the best that could happen? Rather than thinking about that question, or what's the worst that could happen? We're so familiar with that. When people are in a place of change and things feel maybe a bit scary, there is self-doubt going on there, lots of wondering, lots of questioning, to put that question to someone, what's the best that could happen? It drives up excitement, a sense of possibility, of hope. It's energizing. And I'm not asking them to think about the things that could go wrong. I'm just bringing their attention to how good could this get? And it's wonderful to listen to the answer to that question.
I love that question. Try
it. See what happens with your coaches, Adrian. What's the best that could happen?
Yeah, perfect. What a perfect way to end a very important and inspiring conversation as well, Jessica. Thank you so much for joining me in today's Coaching Clubhouse.
Thank you very much for having me. I've loved it.
If you'd like to explore more of Jessica's work, head to talentkeepers.co.uk or tune into her brilliant podcast called Comeback Coach. You can also find her on LinkedIn, of course, and Instagram at comebackcomuk. Those links are in the show notes for you too. You can check out Jessica there, and if today's episode resonated, please share this episode with someone that might be navigating a comeback to their career or job, or a leader who wants to create a more supportive team or workplace. That's it for now. Until next time, I'm Adrian Last, and this has been the Coaching Clubhouse. See you very soon.
The Coaching Clubhouse is produced by Adrian Last Coaching. Discover more on the website at adrianlast.co.uk.